Zchiah U'Matanah Perek Achadaser. Now we learned earlier in Perek Vav Halacha Yudalid, that someone that sent Kalim Mdinas Hayam, and he said, Yunosnu Elu Lebonai, so we say those things that are royal Lebonim go to the Bonim, and those that are royal Lebonis go to the Bonis. So notice, even though he said the word Lebonai, but Bonai means my children, doesn't mean necessarily my sons. Over here we're going to learn that a Shchiv Mirah that says Bonai, so we learned that it means Taka Bonai Dafke Bonim. Perek Achadaser, Shchiv Mirah She'omar, Nechosim Elu Lebonai, that was that Savoy Shchiv Mirah, is Ein HaBonis Bechlolim. So Bonai means Dafke Bonai, because since we're dealing with something that's going to be Koine Lachar Misa, so it's Bedugma of Yerusha, and by Yerusha is Dafke Ben and not a Bas, so therefore we assume that it means Bonai and not Bonis. Nechosim Elu Lebonai, Ein HaBonis Bechlolim. Now Hoyolei Ben Echad Ubas, he only had one Ben, Oy Ben Uben HaBen, he only had one Ben, and a Ben HaBen is Afal Pishuama Lebonai Shuloshin Rabim, nevertheless a Noisten Ela Lebnei. Shahabeno Echad is also Nikra Bonim. The Gemara brings a pasuk, it says Ubnei Palu was a Liov, so even though it was only one, a Liov, but nevertheless it says Ubnei Palu. So Loshin Rabim, so Al even though he said Bonai, but nevertheless he means one son. So Nekuda is when a Shchiv Mirah says Yinosnu Elu Lebonai, it means Bonai, not Bonais, and even if there's only one Ben, and then there's Bonis, or there's a Ben HaBen, nevertheless we assume that it means only his son Mamsh. Halacha Beis, Shchiv Mirah She'omar Nechosei L'Tuvia Umes. He's giving his Nechosei L'Tuvia. Ubo Echad Sheshmei Tuvia, V'Omar Aniyo. This Tuvia is timing, I'm the person that the Shchiv Mirah would have meant, because we had a closeness, and Memele B'Pashtus he meant me. So the din is neutlan, and this din is even Lamashal if we know, the Achreinim say, that even if we know that there's another Tuvia beer, but since this Tuvia is coming along and saying that he has a kesher with this Shchiv Mirah, and the Pasha Samilse Davide Legluyev, the other Tuvia is going to come and prove that he had a stronger kesher, so he'll be proven to be a liar, so we assume that if he's coming along and claiming that he was the one that the Pasha, the Shchiv Mirah meant, so we give it to him and he takes it. Now, if this person that's name is Tuvia is known as Rav Tuvia, and the Shchiv Mirah said Tuvia, is Ein Neitlan. Because since the Shchiv Mirah said Tuvia and he's known as Rav Tuvia, so then we assume that that's not who he meant. However, if they were very close, and Memela, so it would make sense that the Shchiv Mirah would call this Rav Tuvia, even though he's normally known as Rav Tuvia, and the Shchiv Mirah would call this Rav Tuvia just by his name Tuvia, is then his Neutlan. So Bekitzer, when the Shchiv Mirah says that Nechosei L'Tuvia, Tuvia comes along and says that I'm the one that he meant, so we assume that that's who he meant, and Memela give it to Tuvia. If this Tuvia is called Rav Tuvia, so if the Shchiv Mirah is Gazbe, they're very close to each other, and it makes sense that the Shchiv Mirah calls him Tuvia, because the Shchiv Mirah would call him Tuvia, so then he gets it. Mashenkin, if he's not Gazbe, so then we say no, he said Tuvia, and you're Rav Tuvia, so you're not the same person. Now Halacha Gimel Bo Shnayim L'Tveya, and V'chol Echad Memuzik Shmei Tuvia, two people that both have the name Tuvia, both came along to claim it. If one of them was a Talmud Chacham, is Talmud Chacham Kedem. So we assume that he meant to give it to the Talmud Chacham. Aber ein bem Talmud Chacham, and v'hoye echad mem shachin ikarev. One of them was a shachin, or one of them was a karev. So again, there's a svara to say that that's who he meant. So we say who Kedem. So there's two tuvias. One of them is a shachin, the other one's not a shachin, or one is a karev, and the other one's not a karev. So we assume that he meant to the karev. Now hoye echad mem achad shachin v'echad karev. So then the din is shachin kedem, and the Achreinim explained that shachin doesn't really mean a neighbor. Shachin means someone that he deals with, that they have a shchenos and they deal with each other. So even though this person is a karev, but since he's a shachin, so we assume that shachin is before the karev. Now when it says here karev, so it's brought down, the Ramara brings from the Shach, that karev doesn't mean a karev that's mamash a yoirish, because if we're dealing with a karev that's a yoirish, and there's a Tuvia which is a Karev that's a Yerush, and then there's another Tuvia. Even if he's a Talmud Chacham, so then we assume that he meant the Yerush. So Karev means a Karev that's not a Yerush. He's related, but he's not a Yerush. If he's a Yerush, Nachamal. The Ram doesn't say this clearly, but that's what the Shach says. That if the Tuvia, there's one Tuvia that's a Yerush, so even if the other one is a Talmud Chacham, it's nevertheless we assume he meant the Yerush. Masha'inkin, if there's no Yerush, so then one of them is a Talmud Chacham, so we give it to the Talmud Chacham. If one of them is a Shachin or one of them is a Karev, so you give it to the Shachin or to the Karev. If the one is a Shachin, one is a Karev, so then you give it to the Shachin. But again, we're talking about a Karev, which is not a Yerush. Now, Shneim Krevim, Shneim Shchenim, Shneim Talmid Chacham, so then is Yasu Adayonim, Kameshi Yirulem. So then they do as they see fit. Kol mi shadaito neten shal ze omar nesnlei. V'chenim hayirabim. If there were more than two, so you always go basa the das of the dayan. Halacha dalet. Shchiv mira she'omar nechosai lepleni upleni upleni. So that's what he said. Lepleni upleni upleni. So the din is chelkim b'shav afilo hein meya. You give each one a third. If it's a meya, you give each one 100th. However, Amar nechosai lepleni ulabonai. That was the division, lepleni ulabonai. So then we understand that it means chelkin. Pleni noitel machza, v'chol bonav machza. So now, since the bonim are being as a group, there's a group called pleni and there's a group called bonai. So maybe we say that the bonai get half and the pleni gets half. Umayse be'echad sh'amali ishtei nechosai loch lach lech ulabonayach. So in other words, so they divided her and the children. If Amru Chachamim titel he machza and b'chol labonim machza and the other children machza. So in other words, you have a group and you have her. So in Mela you say she's getting half and the group is also getting half. Now Omar lepleni upleni ulebnei pleni. So again, the bnei pleni were categorized as a group. There's pleni upleni and then ubnei pleni. So then it's bnei pleni netlin bnei pleni machza. So this group takes machza, vashnayim arishenim machza. That's the way it is. If you have three individuals, so each one gets equally. Masha'ekin, if you have a group and then another individual, or you have some new gather to Ishtei and to Banayach, so then again, so she gets half and the children get half. That's the gather. Halacha Zayin. Shniv mirasha avar yachlek pleni binachasei. The lashon was yachlek pleni binachasei. So the din is yitel machza. Yachlek means he should divide. He should divide with it equally. So he should get half. Tenu chelik lepleni binachasei. He didn't say yachlek. He says give him a chelik. So what's called a chelik? So here there's an argument. What's called a chelik is yitel echad mishisha aser. So one day is that he takes only a 16th. That's taich a chelik. B'yesh mishaheira yitel revia nechasim. So machlek is whether you take a 16th of the nechasim or you take a revia of the nechasim. These shiurim are not so clear. The Ram is going to say in geimer min shiurim alolo. It's a different gather of the shiurim. It's the Chazal, how Chazal interpreted pshat in these words. Legabi these in yonim, not legabi other in yonim necessarily. We'll soon learn behemshach. Halacha ches is nachamal. A shchiv mirad that says yachlik ploni minachasai, it means that person gets half. If it says yitel chelik minachasai, so either it means a quarter or it means a 16th. Now shchiv mir halacha ches, shchiv mirad she'amar tnu chelik lepleni beber hayayin sheyeshli, give him a chelik beber hayayin sheyeshli. So over here is again yitel revia hayayin. So before we said tnu chelik lepleni binachasai. So one mandama said a 16th and the other mandama said the revia. Beneget nu chelik lepleni beber hayayin sheyeshli. Over here it's clear that yitel revia hayayin. Omar tnu le bechelik lechavis. So over here he specified give him a chelik in order she should be able to fill a barrel. So then harimiot, he didn't just say tnu chelik. A chelik would mean a quarter of the bear. But over here he's saying tnu bechelik lechavis. So it's a little less. So memela harimiot, and therefore v'yitel shminis hayayin. He doesn't take a quarter of the bear. He takes only an eighth of the bear. Now, amal tnule bechelik l'kedera, which is even less. There's a mitzvah called tnule chelik, that's a quarter of the bear. There's a mitzvah tnule chelik l'chavis, so that's an eighth of the bear. Now he's saying tnule bechelik l'kedera. So now is noitel chelik mishnei meser min hayayin. Now he only takes a 12th, because a kedera is less. Now, Amar Tnula Bechelik L'Tafiach. Tafiach is a smaller keli, smaller than a Kedera. So it's smaller. There's a Chavis, and then there's a Kedera, and there's a Tafiach. Tnula Bechelik L'Tafiach. So then, Noitel Chelik Mishisha Aser Min Hayayin Shebeber. So now he takes a 16th. Sharigili Daitei Shelechelik Moit Nischaven. It's Nachamal. When he tells him Chelik Beber, so it's a quarter. If he says Chelik L'Chavis, it's an eighth. If he says Chelik L'Kedera, it's a 12th. And if he says a chelik l'tafiach, it's a 16th. And then the Rambam continues, halacha tes ve'ein geimrim min hashurim ha'ela l'dinacher. So notice here we learned that when a person says a chelik l'beir, a tnu chelik l'pleinim bebeir, you get a quarter. If he says beir l'chavis, tnu chelik l'chavis, so you get an 8th. L'kedera, you get a 12th. L'tafiach, you get a 16th. That's a din specifically b'negei aber shel yayin. Masha'inkin legabi din acher, that din doesn't apply. Now the shittas are, there's a machlekes between the Rambam and the Rif. The shittas are Rambam is that also b'negei a quarter, the fact that you give tnu chelik bebeir by yayin is only that you get a quarter is a special din by a ber shel yayin. Masha'inkin stam is by something else when you say tnu chelik. Over there you won't say that you give a quarter. The Rif holds that this din that ein lemeidim imenu lidvarim acherim l'geimrim min hashurim elu l'din acher, that's only going on the 8th and the 12th and the 16th. Masha'inkin, as far as the quarter is concerned, when a person says 10 chelik, a chelik always means a quarter. And therefore the Rif Taka Paskins in Halacha Zayin, which the Rambam quotes, V'yesh mi shehera yitul revia nechosim, that's a shittas Rif, because he holds that whenever you say chelik, it means chelik or means a revia. So therefore when he says chelik man nechosim, he means a revia. That's shittas Rif. Masha'inkin, the Rambam holds that chelik, the fact that it means a revia is a special din by yayin. Masha'inkin, by other things, we don't find that a chelik means a revia. So therefore, the Rambam Taka Paskins and Halacha Zayin that you give, when you say a chelik min achasa, you only give a 16th. Because the smallest shear that we have, l'tafeach, is a 16th. And memela ametz mechaveira al-varaya. So when he says yitin chelik min achasa, you only give a 16th. So again, we have a machlekes, the Rambam and the Rif. The Rambam holds that the word chelik, when do we know that it means a quarter? Only b'negeya, when we're talking about a ber shel yayin. Masha'inkin, the Rif holds that whenever you say chelik from something, it always means a quarter. And therefore, when you say chelik min achasa, it means a quarter. The Rambam holds not like that. So the Rambam holds that you give only a 16th. And the reason is because since it's the smallest share, so ametz mechaber el varai, you only give a 16th. Halacha Yud. Shchiv mirasha amar titel ishti ke'echad min abonim. My wife should take Yerusha like echad min abonim, even though Isha is not a Yerish, but she should be Yerish ke'echad min abonim. So the din is neitelis ke'echad mi bonim. So she's Yerish ke'echad mi bonim. Now b'shas Maisa, when he said this, there were a certain amount of children, and then later there were more children. When he died, there were more children. So she gets according to the amount of children that were there when he dies. Is mitztar from them elu shehoyu b'shas hava, so you put them together with those that were b'shas hava, and v'nitel is chelik kulam. So she takes a chelik with all of them, which means her chelik is less. Ketzat hoyu shleisha bonim b'shas hava ula'achar zman noldu l'shnayim. So if we're going to go according to b'shas hava, so she's entitled to a quarter. Masha'inkin, if you're going to take into account what was b'shas hamisa, where there was already 5 bonim, so she's only entitled to a 6th. So over here also, so the din is nitelis ke'achad min hachamisha, shehu shtus kol hamam, she only gets a 6th. Now what does she get a 6th from? Halacha Yudala ve'ena nitelis imoim elu b'nechosim shehoyu leb'shas hatzavah. From those nechosim which he owned when he said this tzavah, from those nechosim she gets a 6th. So on one hand we're counting how many children there were b'shas hamisa, abelepil. On what nechosim are we talking about? The nechosim that were there b'shas hatzavah. Aval nechosim shebo le'achar zman hatzavah. But those nechosim which shebo achar zman hatzavah ein lo behem chelik. She'ein adam makna dover shlei barashusei. So that's Yarshin through the Yarshim. So the 5 Yarshim, Yarshin, all the nechosim that he acquired from the tzavah until when he died, until the Misa, and she takes a 6th of the nechosim that were there till the Shas HaTzavah. Halacha Yud Beis. Shchiv merasha amar metaltlin sheyeshli lepleni. That was his lesson. Metaltlin sheyeshli. So what does the word metaltlin mean? Is noitel klei tashmishi, all the utensils. All utensils, that goes into together of the word metaltlin. Avaleis chitim, useirim, ukiyetzvem, food items, or other types of schayra that he has, all of those items aren't part of the lashon metaltlin. However, amar kol metaltlin shali, if he says all my metaltlin, so then his neitel akel, he takes all the metaltlin. And v'havodim is also b'chalal metalton. Avodim are also included in metalton. When he says kol metalton is including avodim, even though avodim are hukshel karkois, but nevertheless, with this din, when a person says kol metalton shiashli, it includes the avodim also. Avol lei richaim atachtenu kietzva. On the millstone, there's the stone that's on top, which is a metaltal, and then there's the millstone on the bottom, which is attached to the ground. So we say, when a person says kol metalton shali, it's not including the richaim atachtena. Why? Sharei mechuberes loretz, because the richaim atachtena is attached to the ground. However, Amar kol metaltal, he didn't say kol metaltalin. He said kol metaltal, anything that's movable. Now the rechaim tachtena could be detached. It's attached to the ground, but it could be detached. Is kol metaltal is netel af rechaim tachtena kietzvam, because sof kol sof it could be detached. Now, so we spoke about that he said metaltal shieshli or kol metaltal shieshli or kol hamitaltal. Now shchiv mirasha Amar nechase lepleni. He didn't say metaltalin. He said nechase lepleni. So then netel kol metaltalin. He takes all metaltalin v'chol karkois. V'habgodim, v'havodim, v'habehemes, v'haefes, v'hatfilin, im sh'ar svarim. Everything is included. Hakel, b'chlal, and nechosim. Everything is included, b'chlal, and nechosim. I will say for Teira, yesh b'sofik, imu b'chlal, nechosim, or yeina. Whether or not the Sefer Teira is also b'chlal, nechosim, it's a different type of nechas. So since a different type of nechas, so there's a suffix whether a Sefer Teira is also included b'chlam nechasim. Lefichachim tov say if the mekabel who's teifas a mitzvah miyodi, because it's not clear that it's not. Masha'inkin, you don't give it to him. He doesn't have a right to mon it because hamitz mechaveri oliver right. L'chure on Pashtus, when the Rambam, when it's in Halacha Tizva, when he says nechasi lepleni, he takes kol metalton v'chol karkois v'abgodim v'avodim. So l'chure, the bgodim were also nichlal if he would say kol metalton. It's not only if he would say nechase lepleni. And al derez behema efes. If avodim are nichlalim in kol metalton shiashli, so bepashas everything, anything that's metaltal is included, including tefillin. The chiddush is like that everything he takes, but a sefer Teira, even though he's taking everything, but b'negei a sefer Teira, there's a suffix whether a sefer Teira is considered b'chlal nechosim. Halacha tezayin. Shchiv mirasha Amar tnu masayim zuz lepleni pcheri karoyloi. So he has a son of pcher, and he says tnu masayim zuz lepleni pcheri karoyloi. He has the words karoyloi. So the din is noitlon, and also in Eitel B'chiras, he knows it's not instead of the B'chera. Me say he's my B'cher, Memeli is entitled to Pishnayim, and besides that, he wants him to also take another 200. However, if he said B'B'chirase, he didn't say Tnu Masayim Zuz Lepleni B'cheri, Koroyle. He said Tnu Masayim Zuz Lepleni B'cheri, B'B'chirase, even if he added the word Koroyle, but Lepel he added the word B'B'chirase. So now the B'cher is Yodel Ol Yein. He doesn't get side the B'chera and side the Masayim Zuz. Yodel Ol Yein, Ratza Chelik B'chera. If the Chelik B'chera is more than Masayim Zuz, he takes the Chelik B'chera. And Neitel Ratza Masayim Zuz. And Ratza Masayim Zuz is Neitel. So then he has the choice. So now since he said that he should give the Masayim Zuz L'Pleini B'cheri B'B'cherase, even if he added Karoi Eloi, so nevertheless, so it means it's to say either Masayim Zuz or the B'chera. So he has a wife, and his wife is really entitled to a ksuba. And he also said, "Tnu masayim zuz lepleinis ishti karoilo is neitlosan." She gets the masayim zuz, and also when they tell us ksubasa, she takes the ksuba as well. However, v'im amar big ksubasa, he added the word "Tnu masayim zuz lepleinis ishti big ksubasa." So here is yodel ol yein. If the ksuba is more then the Masayim Zuz, she can insist that she wants the Ksuba, and if the Ksuba is less than the Masayim Zuz, so then she says she wants the Masayim Zuz, and that's the Masayim Zuz is instead of the Ksuba. Now, Omar Tnu Masayim Zuz L'Pleini Balchevi Karoyle, he has a Balchev, he owes someone money, and he says give him Masayim Zuz, is Noitlon, so he takes the Masayim Zuz, the Neutl is Chayve. So, Lepel, he didn't say over here B'Chayve. He said, I have a Balchev, and I want to also give him a Masayim Zuz. It has nothing to do with the Alva. It's a separate Alva. There's no rebus involved. I owe him money, and that you have to pay him. But besides that, I want to give him another Masayim Zuz. However, Amar B'Cheve, he says, Tnu Masayim Zuz, L'Pleini Balchevi. B'Cheve, so then, Ein Le'el L'Cheve. He knows, he gets only Cheve. He knows, if this is more than the Chayv, and he's giving him an option to take Masayim Zuz instead of the Chayv. That would be Ribis. So Memela, he can't take more, and if it's less, obviously he can't force him to take less. So Memela is entitled to the Chayv. So therefore, when a person says Snu Masayim Zuz Lo Pleni Bal Chayvi Koroi Loi, so then that he's adding the Masayim Zuz to the Bal Chayv. Masha'enkin, if he's saying B'chayvi, so that's meaningless. Halacha Chof. Shchiv Mira Sha'omar Tnu Arba Mei Zuz Lo Pleni. He makes like two statements. Tnu Arba Mei Zuz Lo Pleni. And V'yisa Biti, you could almost put a comma in between Tnu Arba Mei Zuz Lo Pleni and V'yisa Biti. So we say Hareze K'mishanas L'Shtei Matanos. He said two things. First of all, and Kolezim Em Sheyirse, he could do both, or he could do whichever one he wants. Lefichoch. In other words, he's giving him the option to take Masayim Zuz, he's giving him the option to take Biti, and he's giving him the option to take both. Lefichoch Im Ratza Likach HaMoiz V'leis Abbas is Yikach. He could take the money without marrying. That's talking because he didn't say in order to marry the Bas. He says, through Arba Meiz Zuz Lepleni, and also he said V'yisa Biti. Aval Mamar Yikach Biti Utnule Arba Meiz Zuz. Whereas he said first, he said Yikach Biti V'yitnule Arba Meiz Zuz. So then it's Arizat Nai. He knows it's not a din Hilchas Nai. He knows it's a din that he's saying only Ba'ifun Kazeh. V'leyiske b'mois that Yikach Habas. The whole Zchiah that he's having the Bas says Yisabi to let him marry my daughter, and if he marries my daughter, so Yitn Leah the Arba Me'ezus. Halacha Chafal Shchiv Mira Sha'amar Tznu Arba Me'ezus Lebiti Biksubasa Eliksubasa. Now it used to be we learn in Hilchas Ishus that in the Ksuba when a woman brings in money into the marriage, so you write into the Ksuba that this is the money she brought into the marriage. And Memela, if he divorces her or he dies, so she's entitled to be reimbursed of that money. Now, there's some places the minig was that the amount of money that she brought in, that's the amount of money that he wrote. And sometimes it was that they would bring, let's say, a certain amount of money, and they would write double. Let's say she would bring in 100, so they would write that she brought in 200, and that the chiyuv is 200. Now, over here he said, Tnu arba mea zuz lebiti biksubasa liksubasa. Whereas give the Arba Mea Zuz in order to be able to write something into the Ksuba. So B'Pashtus it means give her enough money that she should be able to write Arba Mea Zuz in the Ksuba. Is im derech Anshe Oyer Leheise B'Shumas HaNedunya, that they would assess the Nedunya for more than its real value, and they would write V'lichtiv Shavim Mana B'Masayim. If she would bring in just a mana, they would write that she brought in a Masayim. Is then, and he said that she should write Arba Meis bin Biksubasa. Is Eina Nitelis Ela Masayim Zuz, so she only received Masayim Zuz. Shareliyama Arba Meis Zuz Tam. He didn't say to give her Arba Meis Zuz. Ela Biksubasa, which means Kolema. How are we interpreting Pshat in the words? Tnula Mashatia Shuma Biksubasa Arba Meis Zuz. Give her enough that they should be able to write in the Ksuba that she brought in Arba Meis Zuz. And since the Seder over there was that if she brings 200 zuz, they write Arba Mea zuz, so maybe all you have to do is give 200 zuz, and it's kilo, so that's enough to be able to write Arba Mea zuz, and that was the instruction. Halacha Chav Beis. Omar Tnu Nedunya Lebiti, Kach V'Kach Begodim, or Kach V'Kach Kelim. This is what he instructed in clothes, or in Kelim, what you should give Lebiti. And Lepeil Huzlu Begodim, V'Kelim Achrekein. And now, when he said it, so they were worth more. And now, in order to give her that amount of money, it would cost less. So the question is, does she get the value of what the money of these begadim and kelim were worth then, or she just gets the begadim and kelim? So the din is harevach liyisema. So the yisema are the ones that gain. And so they give her the begadim and the kelim as he instructed, and they buy it for cheaper. So she's getting less value, on those money value in what she's getting. But she's getting the item that he instructed to give her. Give 400 zuz worth of yayin lebiti. That was the instruction. Give 400 zuz worth of yayin lebiti. And lepel v'hukar yayin. So at that point in time, let's say 400 zuz worth of yayin was a larger amount of wine, because wine was cheaper. And lepel now, wine is more expensive, so she'll be getting less wine. So the din is harevach liyisema. So the yisema are the ones that gain from the fact that the wine went up. And memela v'neisla arba mea zuz, and they only give her 400 zuz worth of yayin, even though that's less in volume of wine than they would have gotten as he said it b'shas hatzavo. Ma'ase be'echad sho yesa b'kela v'amar tnu lepleni arba mea zuz mehayayin shel makom pleni. So as he had yayin in a certain place, and he instructed, give this pleni arba mea zuz from the yayin shel makom pleni. V'amru chachamim yitel arba mea zuz mid mea yayin. He should take 400 zuz from the value of that yayin. He didn't mean to give 400 zuz weight of wine. He meant to say 400 zuz worth of wine. He meant 400 zuz worth of wine. So why was he speaking mimakim pleni? Why was he saying tznu lepleni arba mea zuz mehayayin shel makim pleni? If he meant to say 400 zuz worth of wine, so where is giving it from? That you shouldn't be able to give him other things. In other words, he wanted to say that you should give him the wine should be miyuchid for this arba mea zuz, and that'll be a yipu keach for him, that they shouldn't be able to be deichem with other things. But really, the nekudas advarim is that he wanted to give him 400 zuz worth of wine, which is not really mamish the same story like we're saying till now. In other words, over here the issue was it went up in value, went down in value. And the question is, are you giving the way the value was then when he said it, or the value is now when they're giving it? That's the issue in the beginning of the halacha. Over here, there's another issue. Are you giving actually the value of wine, or you're giving just the weight of wine? So I'll quote upon him, but the Rambam is comparing the two things. And v'shuv ma'isa be'echad she'amar hadekel lebiti. Person had said a dekel. The palm tree is lebita. And lepel, he didn't leave a dekel. V'niach shnei chatzoy dekel, he had half a dekel column. Is amr chacham tikal shnei chatzoyim shalazen eschav. So we can understand that this is what he meant, even though he said dekel. And lepel, he doesn't have a dekel. He has shnei chatzoy dekel, but nevertheless, you take the 2 chatzoy dekel and you give it to her. And v'heim shekor dekel. And v'shuv ma'isa be'echad sha'amar tnu lepleni bayis amachzik mea kurin. He said, give her a house which could contain 100 kur. Each kur is 30 saw. And they don't find a house that has mea kur, but they have a house that can be magzik mea ve'esrim kur, 120 kur, a larger house. Why? So in other words, we have to assess, even though if you're going to take the words literally, so it's not mamish exactly the way that he said it. So we have to say pshat in his words. The pshat in his words is that he meant to say this house, even though he said mea kur, but lepel, he obviously meant this house. He said a dekel, he obviously meant dishtei chatzoy dekel. When he said arba mea zuz me'ayayim shema complaining, we understand he means 400 zuz worth of that wine shema complaining. If that's what he meant, why did he say ma complaining? So we're saying that's liapis kechi. Halacha chav gimel. Shchiv mira she'amar tnu lebonai shekel b'chol Shabbos. Give to my son or to my sons a shekel b'chol Shabbos. Now, I have a lot of money, or how much money I'm leaving, so I don't want you to give them all the money and they should be able to spend it right away. I want you to give them only a shekel b'chol Shabbos. Either he instructed give a shekel b'chol Shabbos, or don't give them only a shekel. And lepeil v'nimtza she'eni maspik lem elisel b'chol Shabbos. It's not enough that they should have a shekel, they have to have a seller. Seller is 2 shkolim. So the din is neslem kol tzarchim. You give them what they need. It's against his instructions. He wasn't really interested in his children going hungry. He didn't want them to overspend. So maybe he assessed that a shekel will be enough. So maybe they say, give them only a shekel. I don't want them to overspend it right away. But obviously, the pastors, he meant that they should have all they need. Al Derech was learning Behemshech, that even though the words that he said was a little different, but nevertheless, we assess what he really meant to say, what he meant, what was the meaning behind of what he was saying. So over here also, even though he instructed you shouldn't give more than a shekel, but what he really meant to say was, don't give them more than what they need, because he doesn't want them to overspend. Halacha chav dalet, shchiv mira shetziva v'omar al tispedu, that they shouldn't make a hesped for him. So the din is ain't safe to say. But if he says al tik berum in nechasim, they shouldn't use his nechasim to bury him, is ain't shame ulem. Sheyachos al momim bonov v'yipol atzmei al atzibur. So what's going to happen? Lepil, he's going to have to be buried because there's a chiv to bury him. And Lepel, so what's going to happen? So his children aren't going to bury him. So the tzibur is going to have to bury him. So that he doesn't have that right to be able to prevent. In other words, he has a chiyuv to be buried, and he doesn't have a right to go ahead and prevent his children from using the money to bury him and be matal atzmo el tzibur. Ein shemle sheyochas almon of bonov v'yapel atzmo el tzibur she'osel anicha b'lei kfura. You can't leave him b'lei kfura. So there's no choice but to bury him. So if the children aren't going to bury him, the tzibur will have to bury him. You force the children to bury him in a chosav. In other words, you don't listen to these instructions, because these instructions, he had no right to make those instructions.